Hello, Future Rossies and Pre-Med Explorers. This is Milena Garcia, your host for Ross University Checking the Pulse, a pre-med podcast. This is our mini podcast featuring facts and information about our medical program, insights from current students, and tips from practicing physicians. Each week, this broadcast will be broken down in small episodes, focusing on one aspect of our program, also having guests talk about their own experiences as students and as doctors. The personal interview is an important part of the application process at RUSM, where we get to learn a little bit more about the applicants. Every year, we conduct approximately 2,200 interviews. Now, I know this can be a bit nerve-wracking to some applicants, so my guest today is Regional Director for the East Region, Jeff Weisberger, who will be sharing some advice on how to crush your med school interview. Welcome back, Future Rossies. Thanks for joining us again. This week, my guest is Jeff Weisberger. Jeff, let's have a moment to introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, everybody. As Milena said, I'm Jeff Weisberger. I am the Regional Director of Student and University Partnerships for the Eastern United States. So in my capacity with the university, I do field recruitment. So I go out and talk to prospective medical students on campuses. I talk with academic advisors. On the other side of my responsibilities is I am an interviewer for the institution. So I conduct 100 to 150 interviews per year for prospective students. I interview students mostly from the Midwest, Ohio, Michigan, West Virginia, and Kentucky. And I've been with the university for coming up on 4 years. I'll have my 4-year anniversary in February, and I've been working in medical school admissions for about 8 years.
Mm-hmm. And as Jeff mentioned, there are several of us doing interviews, doing 100 to 150 interviews a year. We have interviewers spread out throughout the U.S. to make it easier for the applicants. Jeff, can you cover the format of our interviews? What can the applicants expect?
Sure. Our interview format, it's done via video conference. Takes about an hour in length. So we usually start the interview with a couple of introductory questions just to get everybody comfortable and confident in the process. Then we go through a few ethical scenarios in which we would present a scenario to the applicant and ask a few follow-up questions about that. Then we go into some questions about their motivation for wanting to go to medical school, what they know about our school. We ask some questions about their academic and their clinical history. Go over some strengths and weaknesses toward the end. And then after the interviewer concludes their questions, we give the interviewee an opportunity to ask any remaining questions that they have.
And I know that the personal interview can be a little bit nerve-wracking for the prospective students. What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, it certainly can be nerve-wracking. You can tell pretty much right away when you start an interview with an applicant if they're feeling a bit more nervous than another. I think that's why we really try to go in with some really basic questions to start. You know, what are some things that have happened in your life that have inspired you to want to go to medical school? Why now? Just some really basic kind of softball questions to get it started. But yeah, I do think that it's important to know like what advice an interviewer has that they can give to prospective students and how they can succeed in a medical school interview. I think the first thing to really focus on is just really going over what's in your resume, what's in your personal statement, and trying to figure out what in there the interviewer might ask. So just be ready to talk about anything that's in your resume or personal statement and be able to do that confidently. I think another piece of advice I would give to students is just do some research online. What kind of questions can you expect in a medical school interview? There's a ton of things that are going to come up if you just do that in a Google search. Just what kind of questions can I expect? And a lot of those are going to hold up. They're pretty basic questions. When it comes to reviewing applicants, the admissions committee spends a lot of time reviewing the intricacies of like the student's GPA and their MCAT scores. But in the interview, it's our opportunity to just really get to know you. And so it is a lot more basic, open-ended questions. I would say if there's a possibility to do mock interviews, that's also a really great piece of advice for prospective students, perhaps through the Office of Professional Development at your undergraduate institution, or maybe there's a professional service out there that will allow you to go through some mock interviews just to get you more comfortable in the process of just being face-to-face with somebody and getting grilled to a certain extent. I think applicants sometimes feel like it is that way. And then I would say do as much research as you can on the institution you're applying to. I think this kind of question throws people off sometimes. What do you like about this school? Because obviously we know you're interested in medical school in general, but one of the things that I think trips some students up is what do you like about this school? And so do some research, go on the school's website. Ross is easy to find, medical.rossu.edu. Do some reading about the curriculum, about clinical experiences, and see what it is about this school specifically that you like. And then the other thing is just be ready to talk in detail about your clinical experiences. Pretty much anybody that comes into medical school has some form of clinical experiences. There are a lot of different types of experiences out there that you can get. The best applicants have a well-rounded, wide variety of clinical experiences, and there will be questions about those. So just be ready to talk about what you've done out there. And students a lot of times will ask me, like, what kind of clinical experiences should I be shooting for? What kind of clinical experiences do students come in with? So I've got this little tune that I'm going to play for you to give you a little bit of an idea of what we usually see. So you can volunteer, or you can shadow a doc, or get involved in research, or get a clinical job.
And I forgot to mention at the beginning, Jeff, our regional director, is multi-talented. That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that as far as clinical experiences, if we're looking for students that have research experience. We love to see students that have professional paid experiences. If they are coming in with shadowing experiences or volunteer work, those are all really great ways to get involved in the medical field.
Scribing, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah, I mean that would fall into the professional experience.
You mentioned going to the mock interviews and getting grilled. You know, I feel like practicing getting grilled will make it easier for when you actually get grilled for real, right? So
no doubt.
I second that. So definitely, if you can find your pre-med advisors, make sure to ask if they will do mock interviews with you. The more you practice, the more comfortable you become for the real thing. Jeff, as the interviewer, what are you looking for doing the interview?
Well, as I said before, a lot of the academic stuff is reviewed by the admissions committee. So as an interviewer, we're looking for personality traits and confidence in the interview. And that's kind of hard to replicate. It's hard to give advice about how to show confidence. But I do think that we can identify charisma. We can identify a certain level of motivation in our applicants. And so I think that by doing some of the things I mentioned in the previous question, like doing mock interviews or just being ready for questions about your resume, I think that the confidence is really going to show because you're going to be ready for those questions. You're going to answer them well. I think that coming in and showing something like charisma is really going to help. And then just being really ready to talk about strengths and weaknesses at the end of the interview. And no matter what you're applying for, whether it's a professional program or a job, you're going to get a question that says, what are your strengths? What can you improve on? And so just have, I would say, 2 to 3 strengths, 1 to 2 weaknesses that you can talk about. And I feel like if we see that in the interview, it's going to go really well.
And it's been my experience, Jeff, hopefully you can back me up on this here, that sometimes when I ask the students regarding their weaknesses, sometimes they freak out and they feel like it's a bad thing to tell me something that they need to improve on, right? And the way I see it is this is an opportunity for you, prospective students, future Rossies, to be thoughtful about something that you would like to improve on and perhaps think about how this would affect you as a doctor. So the sooner you start working on this, the better it is. How do you feel about it, Jeff?
Yeah, I would just completely agree with you. I mean, I think that coming into this, if this really is like your lifelong calling, there shouldn't be any issue going into an interview and being able to talk about strengths and weaknesses. And if there are weaknesses, like Milena said, it doesn't say anything negative about you. Everybody has weaknesses. If you went into a meeting and said, I don't have any weaknesses, that would be bad. Everybody has them. And so I do think that sometimes people get caught up in the, I need to come up with a weakness that's also a strength. And then sometimes it's kind of an ingenuine answer. But no, I think you can be totally ready to just admit, I'm a procrastinator, or, I have a history of taking on too much, letting myself put too much on my plate. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Identify those and just tell the interviewer, because everybody has something that they can improve on.
Right. And what do you discourage during the interview?
I think the one thing as interviewers that we have the hardest time with is people that aren't able to give a direct, succinct answer, especially to a really basic question. Sometimes I ask that introductory questions. Tell me a few things that have happened in your life that have inspired you to want to go to medical school. Yes, we are asking for a couple of things, but if that answer goes on for 10 to 15 minutes, that's too much. I mean, really, if I say, I see that you're applying for the January term. Why did you choose that semester specifically? That doesn't require a 2 to 5 minute answer. Like, okay, I want to start as soon as possible. I'm highly motivated. Let's get this going. You know what I mean? And so I think the ability to answer directly and succinctly is something we really look for. Just that you don't need to talk in circles. Your experience and your academics are going to speak for themselves. Just answer the questions as they're presented.
Right. And that's how the practicing ahead of time also helps to be succinct and organized. And Jeff, since we're doing virtual interviews now, what do you suggest is the ideal environment for the applicants?
I think anything that's a quiet environment indoors with a professional background is going to be fine. It's a little bit harder now in the world of doing virtual interviews to say exactly what the room needs to look like. I don't think we need to get that deep into it. But I have interviewed a few students that are sitting in cars. I've interviewed a few students that are sitting outside, and you can hear the garbage truck go past. I think you've got to be indoors. I think you've got to have a nice professional backdrop that isn't going to have anything that's embarrassing behind you. You see my professional background here with some of my son's drawings, but also some of my raw stuff over here. I think that indoor, quiet, make sure your technology is working well. And you're going to be fine there.
I think some students, prospective students, see this as a chance to be more casual, that the virtual interview is more of a casual environment, and it shouldn't be. Please keep in mind, this is still how you are representing yourself to the admissions committee. So do what you think best represents you to the admissions committee, right? So on that note, what do you expect of the dress code for a virtual interview?
I keep coming back to just like the idea of the professional interview in general. You're not going to show up to any kind of professional interview in jeans and sneakers, and so now in a virtual interview, you're probably only going to be seen from the waist up. But I do think for guys, the expectation is probably a shirt and tie with a jacket, just like you wear probably to a job interview or any professional school interview. Make sure that, I guess your hair is combed neatly. Again, just like you're meeting someone face to face. Don't do anything in a virtual environment that is going to be different than how you would conduct yourself in an actual office setting or an actual academic setting. So for guys, I think that a suit or like a sport coat, shirt and tie is probably the standard. I would defer to you to maybe give some advice to our female prospective candidates.
Sure. I would echo your advice. For ladies, the same thing, wear an equivalent to the male suit, something that's appropriate for a professional environment. This is still an interview, nice blouse, anything. Normally what I tell the prospective students that I work with, I will say, if you can wear it to the club, don't wear it to a professional interview. That's my biggest advice. And again, remember, you are representing yourself. And we understand that sometimes you may not have these kinds of clothing items in your closet. It's okay to borrow them, right? We don't know. So as long as you dressed for the occasion, that's what we're looking for. You can give the clothes back the next day to who they belong to.
I love the if you can wear it to the club, don't wear it to the interview. I haven't had anybody show up with Mardi Gras beads or a glow stick yet, but I do think that sometimes you see some things where you're just like, that is an unusual choice. This should be a more professional environment and professional attire.
Jeff, what are some of the best questions that you have been asked?
It's a great question. I love reflecting on what are some of the best questions someone has asked me, not just in the interview, but like when I've been on campuses, when I've been talking to advisors. Can I give you 3? Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So one is, what do I think stands out about the school? And so it's an interesting way to kind of flip that back on the interviewer, because I said earlier I would ask the applicant, what do you like about the school? What stands out to you? And so it's great when a student then will ask me the same. What stands out to me about the institution? As I said, I've been working in medical school admissions for a long time. I've been with RUS for about 4 years. And so I've had a lot of great opportunities to be there on campus and sit in on classes, sit in on labs. And I've worked with first semester students in the capacity of a student care coordinator. And so I do feel like I have a pretty good idea and understanding of what our current and former students really like about the school. And I love to talk about that. Another question that I get a lot is, what can I expect later on? What are some of the habits of highly successful students? And another one that I really love to answer, whether it's, again, on campus or in the interview, because it not only it's just a great question in general, but I think it shows that the student is looking ahead. I'm confident that I'm going to have an opportunity to go through medical school. How can I make sure that I make the most of that opportunity? And so that's a really great question to ask in an interview. And then at the end, just like any professional interview, I always like when people say, can you give me some feedback about how this went? What is some feedback that you could give me, just for my own edification, or in the event that I have additional professional interviews in the future? What do you feel like I did well? What can I improve on? And again, I think that shows a lot about a student's willingness to be adaptable. And that would kind of take me in a full circle back to that first question. What do I think, the second question, what are some of the habits of highly successful students? It's, one of the biggest ones is being adaptable. So like, if you're willing to take some of that constructive feedback and turn it into like a positive way for you to improve, I think that shows a lot. It speaks volumes about the individual.
And what happens after the interview?
After the interview, I do a written evaluation, and then the application coordinator that's been working with the applicants going to look through and see what remaining documents might be missing that would prevent them from getting a decision from the admissions committee. Once they have a completed applicant file, that will then go to the admissions committee. The admissions committee will render a decision, and then the interviewer will get back in touch with the applicant to let them know what that decision is.
And what are the decisions that can come back from the admissions committee?
So there's the obvious admit and deny. We don't love the denial calls. We love the admit calls. And so those are pretty self-explanatory. Admit means we'd love to have you. We'll see you in a few months. Deny means, unfortunately, at this time, we don't feel like this is going to be a great fit for you at our institution. But maybe here's some advice. We'd encourage you to reapply in the future. Right. There's also a third decision possibility that can come back, which is an invitation to go into our MERT program. That's the Medical Education Readiness Program, as you see right here represented in that logo.
And in fact, to everybody listening, we did a podcast episode especially on MERP. It's episode 2, so everybody check back. Make sure you listen to that. Jeff, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for spending your time here with us. What about any advice or less recommendations for our future Rossies?
Yeah, I think the only other piece of advice I would have is talk to current and former students. Milena and I work for the institution. We can probably answer just about any question that you have about the school, about the curriculum, about clinical experiences, but there's nothing like getting a firsthand description of what it's like to be a student or having been a student in the past, like for the example of our graduates. And so I think that just getting a well-rounded understanding of what you may be getting yourself involved with if you decide to come to Ross by talking to current and former students, that can really be kind of the icing on the cake. If you're on the fence, I went through the interview, I talked to somebody that works for the school, I feel pretty good about it, but I'm still not totally sure. Talk to current and former students. I think you'll find that the feedback you're going to get is overwhelmingly positive, and I really think that it's going to be that extra push that you would need to convince you that this is going to be a great move for you.
Absolutely. All really valuable advice. Jeff, thank you again for your time and for everything that you shared here with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And thanks everybody for joining us, and we will see you next week. Thank you for listening to Ross University Checking the Pulse, a pre-med podcast. This is Milena Garcia, your host. This podcast is made for you, so let me know what topics you want us to cover on future episodes. You can send me your comments, feedbacks, and requests to mgarcia@rossu.edu. Definitely follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and our YouTube channel at Ross Med School, or on Facebook. If you're listening to this podcast on iTunes, I am working my way to 5 stars, so remember to send me your comments and let me know your ideas. If you're on Spotify, remember to click on the follow button to get our future episodes. All right, see you future Rossies and Pre-Med Explorers next week. This mini podcast is edited and produced by our in-house guru, Chris King.